My mother picked up a wet woman on a rainy day. The woman is very good at raising snakes. She said, snakes are naturally lustful and are the best tonic for men. My mother caught the thickest and strongest snake from her collection and made soup for my brother. That night, my brother climbed into the woman's bed. My mother looked at the snakes lying in all directions in the snake circle and said with a grin, "We are getting rich, we are getting rich. This is really useful." The next day, the woman left the room with red eyes. Following behind was my brother, who looked very satisfied. I trotted over to the woman with some concern and asked her carefully, "Are you okay?" Before the woman could say anything, my mother kicked me to the ground and said, "What do you mean by you? Call me sister-in-law." I didn't dare to resist. I shrank back and called out, "Sister-in-law." After my mother discovered the magical uses of snakes, she hung a sign directly at the door of my house saying "Snakes for sale, 1 for 1,000 gold coins." The villagers looked at the snake, then looked at my mother, with doubts on their faces. "Is this snake really as useful as you say?" My mother doesn't talk nonsense either. I rolled up my sleeves, chopped off a snake head with my knife, and said, "Whether it is useful or not, my words have no say. I will stew one for everyone now, and you will know after you try it." When my sister-in-law heard this, her face turned pale and she said to my mother, "This is a lust snake, we must take it home to eat. They can't help themselves when eating here." My mother slapped my sister-in-law in the face, cursing, "It's your turn to give orders here. If you keep talking, I'll beat you to death." My sister-in-law opened her mouth with blood flowing from it, but she didn't dare to say anything. After a while, the big iron pot on the stove began to smell the aroma of meat. The people around her drooled at the smell. I took a deep breath of the meaty aroma in the air. It smelled so good, really so good, many times more fragrant than pork. My mother looked at everyone's reaction with a smug look on her face. Just when I wanted to take another step forward, my sister-in-law suddenly pulled me back. She covered my nose with her hand, shook her head and said to me, "Don't smell it, and don't eat it." I looked at my sister-in-law in surprise. I wanted to ask her why, but my sister-in-law refused to say anything and just held me tightly. It only took a moment. The snake meat in the pot was eaten up completely, without even a drop of soup left. After eating the snake meat, the men all had red faces and thick necks, and their eyes were green when they looked at my sister-in-law. I don't know who was brave enough to touch my sister-in-law's butt. My sister-in-law screamed in fear. Unfortunately, this terrified scream, when heard by these men, was the most arousing sound. Now everyone couldn't hold back anymore and pounced on my sister-in-law one after another. I tried to step forward to stop it, but was thrown to the ground. I looked at my brother for help. After all, my sister-in-law is now his nominal wife. But my brother just glanced at me and said nothing more. My mother was yelling at the side, "You have to pay extra, you have to pay extra if you sleep." After an unknown amount of time, the group of people pulled up their pants one by one and climbed up from my sister-in-law. When they left, each of them took away a snake. My mother counted the money with a smile on her face, urging my sister-in-law to raise another litter. My sister-in-law said nothing, numbly got up from the ground and stumbled back to her room. At night, while my mother and brother were asleep, I sneaked into my sister-in-law's room and handed her a bag of lime. "Sister-in-law, I don't have any medicine, but lime can stop the bleeding. You can use it for now. I will go to the mountain to get you some medicine tomorrow." My sister-in-law looked at the lime, then looked at me, and suddenly smiled sinisterly. I was so scared by her smile that I asked her cautiously, "What are you laughing at?" My sister-in-law didn't answer me. She just reached out and touched my head and said, "Don't eat the remaining snake meat. Don't eat a single bite. Do you hear me?" Although I didn't know why my sister-in-law said that, I still nodded heavily and said, "Sister-in-law, I understand. Don't worry, I won't eat it." Only then did my sister-in-law let me go with satisfaction. The next day, as soon as I woke up, I heard my mother's scream. I jumped out of bed with a start. As soon as I went out, I saw my sister-in-law had committed suicide. She was wearing a blood-stained red shirt and hanged on the beam of my house. When my mother saw me, she dragged me to my sister-in-law's body and told me to put her down. I looked at my sister-in-law's body and took 2 steps back in fear. I didn't dare to do that. My mother came up and started punching and kicking me. It wasn't until I said in a crying voice, "Mom, please stop hitting me. I'll let go," that my mother stopped. The moment my hands touched my sister-in-law's body, cold sweat immediately spread all over my body. Something is wrong. My sister-in-law has been dead for so long, but her body is not stiff at all. It's also warm and elastic. Something is so wrong. My scalp was tingling and I didn't dare to move, but my mother kept scolding and urging me on. I could only grit my teeth and put my sister-in-law's body down. My mother looked at my sister-in-law's body with a gloomy face and asked me to drag it directly to the mass grave. My brother suddenly said, "Mom, this thing is unlucky to die. Otherwise, let's keep her and ask third uncle to take a look at her. It will give me peace of mind." My third uncle is the fortune teller in our village. When my mother heard my brother say this, she also became hesitant. Finally, he sighed and said, "Just wait and see. I'm old and not afraid of her, but I can't let her harm you." My nose felt sore when I saw how loving the mother was and how filial the son was. Yes, in my mother's eyes, my brother is her only son, and I am just a dog. After my third uncle came, he stared at my sister-in-law's body for a long time. Every time he looked at it, his face became gloomier. Finally, my third uncle pulled my mother aside and muttered to her for a long time. I couldn't hear what they were mumbling. I only know that after they finished talking, my mother asked me to switch rooms with my brother. I was so scared that my face turned pale and I wanted to refuse immediately. But third uncle patted my shoulder with a kind expression and said, "Benjamin, don't worry, third uncle won't harm you. Your brother is my great-nephew, and so are you. I treat you two equally." I was still a little hesitant. "Then why did you ask us to change rooms?" Third uncle frowned. "This little girl wearing red clothes and hanging herself must become a ghost. Your horoscope is yang, so you should live on the yang side, which is your brother's room. Your brother's horoscope is yin, so he should live on the yin side, which is your room. Only this way can we save the lives of both of you. Otherwise, you will both die." Uncle San emphasized the word mortality so much that I shuddered and didn't dare to say anything more. I quickly agreed. After changing the room, I slept soundly at night. My brother's bed is big and soft, very comfortable to sleep on, unlike my bed which doesn't even have a mattress. The next day, as soon as I got up, I saw my third uncle standing at the door, looking at me with a smile on his face. "How is it?" I said, "It's okay, do you believe it now?" I blushed in embarrassment, feeling a little ashamed for doubting my uncle yesterday. I was about to speak when my mother interrupted me. My mother asked me to help with the cooking. She said that the people who would be in charge of my sister-in-law's funeral would be here soon. The yin-yang meal cannot be late, it must be prepared in advance so that the guests will have food to eat when they arrive. I dare not hesitate any longer and trotted all the way to my mother. As soon as I got to the big pot, I was stunned. There were densely packed snake heads scattered around, at least hundreds or even thousands of them. I looked at my mother with a tingling scalp. Just as I was about to speak, she stopped me with a vicious look. My mother whispered, "Don't say anything. If your third uncle finds out, I'll beat you to death. Your uncle insisted not to stew snake meat. But we have ready-made snake meat at home, so why not eat it? How much does it cost to buy pork? I spend all my money on pork. How can I help your brother find a wife?" I processed the snake meat so well that they couldn't even tell what kind of meat it was. I lowered my head and dared not speak again. I followed my mother's instructions, put the snake head and skin into a sack, and secretly threw it into the back mountain when my third uncle wasn't paying attention. Wait until I get home. The house was already packed with people. My mother held a spoon and served rice to people one spoonful at a time. So people eat with their mouths full of oil, picking up the meat with chopsticks and putting it into their mouths piece by piece. My uncle handed me a bowl of meat and told me to eat quickly, eat more. Your sister-in-law will be buried tomorrow. You should get enough strength so that you can keep vigil for her tonight. My hand holding the bowl trembled and I looked at my third uncle with a pale face. Uncle, the way my sister-in-law died, asking me to keep vigil, isn't that asking me to die? I don't want to die, uncle. Third uncle looked at me deeply, then patted my shoulder and said, don't worry, you are a virgin, and you have a young life, so no ghosts can invade you. Besides, you are the only one who can suppress your sister-in-law. You must keep watch at night. Otherwise your whole family will die. I wanted to refuse again, but before I could open my mouth, my mother came towards me aggressively. I was so scared that I quickly closed my mouth. He said timidly, third uncle, I understand. After seeing my attitude, the third uncle left with satisfaction. As soon as the third uncle turned around, my brother snatched the meat from my hand. Then he kicked me to the ground and spit at me fiercely, sleeping in my bed is fine, but eating meat, are you worthy enough? I shrank back and didn't dare say a word. As the evening approached, when my third uncle left, he reminded me again, remember, eat, drink, defecate and urinate in the room tonight. No matter what, don't leave the house. Don't agree to anything no matter who tells you to. Do you hear me? I haven't spoken yet. My mother immediately said, third master, don't worry. As soon as it gets dark, I'll lock him in the room. Lock it from the outside so he can't get out even if he wants to. My third uncle looked at my pale face and then at my mother. He seemed to want to say something several times, but in the end he said nothing, just shook his sleeves and left. As soon as my third uncle passed away, my mother drove me to the mourning hall. Looking at the blood-red coffin, my legs went weak. I looked at my mother pleadingly, Mom, I will definitely stay vigil and I will definitely not go out. Can you please not lock me in? My mother didn't say anything, she just looked at me coldly and closed the door. I saw through the crack in the door that she had locked the door with a padlock as thick as a baby's arm. No matter how I yelled, she remained unmoved. Gradually, I got tired of shouting and became numb. I dragged myself to my sister-in-law step by step. I cried in my voice, Sister-in-law, I have never hurt you. You must not hurt me either. I just want to live, even if I have to live like a dog, I just want to live. After I said this, there was no extra movement in the entire mourning hall. I heaved a sigh of relief and became bolder. I leaned against the coffin and fell asleep in a daze. I don't know how long it took, but suddenly there was a strange noise coming from the coffin. I was startled and woke up instantly. I put my ear to the coffin, and the sound of nails scratching the coffin board came out clearly from inside the coffin. Cold sweat instantly covered my whole body. I knelt beside the coffin and kowtowed loudly, Sister-in-law, I beg you, please let me go. I have never hurt you. I don't know how many times I kowtowed. The noise from the coffin finally stopped until I was dizzy. Just when I breathed a sigh of relief, I suddenly heard the sound of a key unlocking the door. I was so scared that I huddled behind the coffin. The sound continued, and I felt that every breath I took was infinitely long. It lasted so long that I was about to die of fear when the door suddenly creaked open. It's my brother. He walked in with red eyes. He took one look at me and chased me out. I was so happy that I ran out of the mourning hall. When I closed the door, I saw my brother open the coffin lid and jumped in eagerly. After a while, groaning sounds were heard from the mourning hall. My brother is in. I covered my mouth in shock. But my sister-in-law is obviously dead. Did he not even spare the dead? It didn't take long. My brother walked out of the morning hall with his pants held up, looking very satisfied. He looked at me fiercely and said, "I haven't been here tonight, you know. If anyone else knows about this, I will kill you." I shrank my neck in fear and promised again and again that I would not tell anyone. Only then did my brother leave with satisfaction. The next morning, my third uncle came. When he saw me, a hint of surprise flashed across his face. I looked at my third uncle's face and spoke cautiously, "Third uncle, what's wrong?" Uncle San frowned and asked me, "Did anything happen last night?" Thinking of my brother's warning to me last night, I gritted my teeth and insisted that I didn't. I didn't know whether third uncle believed me or not, he just stared at me. My back felt cold when third uncle stared at me, and just when I could no longer hold on and wanted to tell him the truth, a cry of surprise interrupted third uncle's gaze. "It's my mother's voice." My third uncle hurried to my mother's room. I saw that my brother's arms and neck were covered with a thick layer of snake scales, and his hands were grasping at something desperately. Third uncle looked at this scene with a face so gloomy that water seemed to drip out of it. He murmured, "It's impossible. It's obvious that the trouble has been diverted to someone else. How is it possible?" As he said that, third uncle suddenly grabbed my hand and stared at me with a gloomy face. "Last night, your brother went to the funeral hall, right?" Before I could open my mouth, I was interrupted by my mother's wailing, "Third master, please don't worry about those things. Come and take a look at the child. If you continue like this, the child will not be able to hold on." My third uncle had no choice but to let go of my hand and let me go to the kitchen to fetch a bowl of rice. I didn't dare to hesitate, and trotted all the way to the kitchen, and brought a bowl of rice to my uncle. He took the rice and sprinkled it on my brother. The moment the rice touched my brother's skin, black smoke immediately came out. After the rice in the bowl was all scattered, my brother also calmed down. He fainted in my mother's arms and lost consciousness. My mother looked at my uncle cautiously, "Uncle, is Frank okay?" The third uncle gritted his teeth and said, "Nothing. This is a serious matter. Did this beast go to the funeral home last night? Why is there so much evil energy around him? How is it possible that—" At this point, third uncle's voice suddenly stopped, as if he had thought of something, and he stumbled towards the morning hall. He opened the coffin and saw my sister-in-law's body. My uncle's body shook and he almost fell to the ground. I supported my third uncle and followed his gaze, looking into the coffin. I saw that my sister-in-law's belly, which was unusually flat last night, was now as big as a ball. I looked at my third uncle with horror. The third uncle's face turned as pale as paper in an instant, and he murmured, "Is it true? Is that so? You deserve it, it's what you deserve. It's what you deserve." My mother followed too. Looking at my sister-in-law's body, I looked at my uncle helplessly. "Uncle, what's going on? She wasn't like this when she died, right?" My third uncle glared at my mother fiercely and said with gritted teeth, "Don't ask me, what's the point of asking me? Go ask your son what good things he has done. What a lustful thing, I can't take care of this matter." My third uncle shook his sleeves and wanted to leave. My mother grabbed my third uncle's sleeve tightly and said, "Third uncle, you can't do this. You can't just ignore it. Frank is okay." My third uncle interrupted my mother harshly. Finally, he sighed, pointed at my sister-in-law's body and said, "This girl's origins are unknown, and she was evil to begin with. Plus, he died a violent death, which makes him even more ferocious and unusual. I'm in charge of this matter because I'm trying to snatch people from the hands of the devil. I'm going to do everything I can to give you a chance to survive. There was hope for life. But you cut it off, causing her to absorb the yang energy after her death and become pregnant with a corpse." My mother didn't care what third uncle said. She just grabbed his sleeve and stared at him intently. "Third master, there will be a way, right? There must be a way. You won't just watch Frank die, right? The third master looked at my mother deeply, then took out 3 yellow talismans from his pocket, handed 2 to my mother and 1 to me. Remember, put this talisman on the head of your bed as soon as it gets dark. No matter what happens tonight, no matter what noise you hear, don't go out. Remember? My mother nodded vigorously. The third uncle said quietly, "This thing is too powerful. I can't handle it. I can only go to the mountain to ask my junior uncle for help. You won't be back until tomorrow at the latest, but if you listen to me tonight, that thing won't be able to do anything to you." As soon as my third uncle left, I went back to my room without even eating, closed the door, and pasted the yellow talisman right at the head of my bed. I sat on my bed and went over everything that had happened recently in my mind. Then he stared at the yellow talisman from day to night. The next day, around noon, my uncle came to my house with a young man. The young man looked at me, then turned to look at my uncle. My uncle's face turned pale instantly. I wanted to say something, but the young man interrupted me with a gesture. "Don't tell me, I'm not interested in knowing. My goal is to subdue the ghosts and corpses. It is also the only thing I want to do." The young man's tone was rude, but third uncle didn't get angry at all. He timidly asked the young man what to do. The young man said nothing and walked straight towards the morning hall. I followed him closely. The young man turned his head and looked at me. "Why are you following me?" I lowered my head and asked him in a whisper, "Can you save me?" He looked at me with interest. "What? You know everything?" I nodded, then shook my head violently. He put on a meaningful smile and said to me, "Follow me. By the way, my name is Michael." Michael saw my sister's body, his expression changed immediately. I approached him and asked him, "Is there something wrong?" Michael's face was gloomy. I thought it was just an ordinary mother and child corpse, but I didn't expect that she was not human. "If it's not a person, then what is it?" Michael took a deep breath and said, "Go and see your brother and you will know." I immediately led Michael to my brother's room. Even though I was mentally prepared, I was still shocked the moment I saw my brother. There were thousands of tiny, string-like things crawling under my brother's skin, winding and crisscrossing. My brother curled up on the bed, wailing in pain. Michael walked up, patted my brother on the shoulder, and then put a yellow talisman on my brother's forehead. My brother immediately calmed down, and the thing that was about to burst out from under his skin also calmed down. Michael with surprise and joy, "Uncle Junior, is everything all right?" Michael glanced at him and said, "This is just a temporary solution, not a fundamental solution. The mother body has become a corpse evil. If we want to solve this problem, we have to start with the corpse evil." Michael asked me to take him to the back hill. I looked at him curiously. "What are you doing in the back hills?" "Go chop down a 100-year-old peach tree. An ordinary coffin can't calm her down, whether it's a red coffin or a black coffin. Only a 100-year-old peach wood can do it." I didn't ask any more questions, but turned around and led Michael to the back of the mountain. Michael circled the back of the mountain 3 times, and finally stopped in front of a mahogany tree as thick as a bucket. I asked Michael while we were chopping mahogany, "You will save me, right?" Michael continued chopping trees and asked me, "What do you know?" I shook my head. "I know nothing, but I know everything. I don't know what's going on. But I know clearly that my mother and my third uncle want me to die. Or, they want to use my life to exchange for my brother's life. I don't want to die, so can you save me?" Michael intently. Michael put down the tools in his hand and looked at me deeply. "Don't worry, you and your brother will not die. Neither will you." I lowered my head and said nothing more. I was thinking, won't we all die? That doesn't seem so good. Michael and I were carrying the peach wood back. My mother was running around in the yard, anxiously. When he saw us, he said angrily, "Why did you take so long? The child must have suffered so much during this time." Michael glanced at my mother, and before he could say anything, third uncle came up and slapped my mother twice on the face. "Don't be rude to junior uncle." My mother covered her face and immediately quieted down. I sneered in my heart. It is really human nature to bully the weak and fear the strong. Michael ignored my mother and turned to look at me. "Go find a bowl of dog blood and 4 coffin nails. I'll stay home and make the coffin. Remember to hurry up, otherwise without the Peachwood coffin tonight, even I might not be able to do anything to her." Michael blankly, "What are coffin nails? Where do I find them?" The third uncle took over the conversation and said, "Go to your 6th grandmother's house. Your 6th grandmother has always loved you. Only you can get this thing from her." I nodded, turned around and wanted to run to 6th grandma's house. But my uncle stopped me and said, "Remember, come back as soon as you get your things. Don't delay." I nodded solemnly, and my third uncle finally breathed a sigh of relief and let go of my arms. I trotted over to 6th grandma's house. When 6th grandma saw me, she couldn't stop smiling, but as she smiled she started crying. She reached out her hand and touched my head, saying, "I'm glad you're okay. 6th aunt wanted to save you, but her legs were useless and she couldn't get to your house. Fortunately, you are okay." I looked at 6th grandma in surprise. "6th grandma, do you know everything that happened in the past few days?" Grandma Lou wiped her tears and said, "Although my legs and feet are not working well, my Taoism skills are still there. There has been a lot of resentment in the village these days. I've heard a lot of things here and there, so I can probably tell what happened. I know why you came. Although this coffin nail is a rare thing, it's worth giving it to you as long as it can save your life." As she said this, 6th grandma wanted to stand up and get the Peachwood nails for me. But I held 6th grandma's hand and said, "6th grandma, don't worry. I want to ask you a few questions." 6th grandma looked at me deeply. The expression on her face was obscure and difficult to understand. After a long while, she finally spoke, "Ask." 6th aunt, my mother has disliked me since I was a child. Do you know why? Or rather, why did my mother give birth to me? 6th grandma took a deep breath and said, "I gave birth to you to carry on your father's family line. Your mother may not want to give birth to you, but your father will never agree to her." Is that really the case? I smiled bitterly. Is my brother really not my father's son? 6th aunt, my brother is third uncle's son, right? 6th grandma waved her hands hastily. No, what are you thinking about, kid? I don't know how many generations apart there is between your third uncle and your mother. If your brother was your third uncle's child, they would have been scolded to death long ago. But although your brother is not your third uncle's son, he is indeed related to your third uncle. He is your third great-uncle's grandson. I took a deep breath, and then it all made sense. On the first night, my third uncle asked me to switch rooms with my brother in order to maximize my brother's safety. The next night, my third uncle asked me to keep vigil because he wanted me to die in place of my brother. If it wasn't for my mother being stingy during the day and cooking the snake. If my brother hadn't eaten the lust snake and lost control of himself, I would have died long ago. Grandma 6 touched my head with pity and said, "Poor child, you were born in such a place. I am the fish on the chopping board, and I can only accept my fate when others plot against me." I looked at Sun Young with a stern look in my eyes. Who said that? Who said that I can only accept my fate? Why should I accept my fate? Why should others be the butchers and I the meat? Why can't it be that I am the butcher and others are the meat? 6th grandma looked at me in shock. "Kid, what are you doing?" I stared at 6th grandma with burning eyes. "I want to change my fate." 6th grandma, please give me the coffin nails. When I took the coffin nails and the black dog blood home, my uncle asked me with a bad look on his face, "Why did you take so long?" I shrank back a bit and said timidly, 6th aunt said coffin nails are the best stuff. She didn't want to give them to me. I polished them for a long time before she took them out. Hearing this, third uncle's expression eased a little. Uncle San looked me up and down, and asked hesitantly, "Your sixth grandma didn't tell you anything, did she?" I lowered my head and said, "She said my sister-in-law is a very powerful person, and told me to be careful and to save my life." "Didn't you say anything else?" I shook my head. "No." Only then did my third uncle breathe a sigh of relief and ask me to take the things and go find Michael quickly. When I got to Michael, he had already made the coffin. Michael in astonishment. Normally, a coffin maker has to make an appointment half a month in advance to make a coffin. "You are so much faster than the coffin maker," Michael said nonchalantly. "It's just some special techniques. Time is running out, so this is the only way." After saying that, Michael looked at the mourning hall and said, "Go inside and carry your sister-in-law out. I went around your village and found that except for you, everyone else has resentment. That is to say, only you can carry your sister-in-law out. If anyone else tries, they will either die or get hurt." I squinted my eyes and looked at Michael. "That is to say, my sister-in-law will harm everyone in this village, but she won't harm me, right?" Michael didn't say anything, but his expression told me the answer. I was right. I nodded and said, "Wait here for me. I'll carry my sister-in-law out on my back." In the coffin, my sister-in-law's belly was bigger than before. Moreover, her 10 bald fingers now have long red nails. If you look closely, you can see that her nails are still growing. Although the speed was very slow, it was definitely growing. I didn't dare to delay any longer, and hurriedly carried my sister-in-law's body and walked out of the mourning hall. Michael looked at my sister-in-law's body, his face gloomy and watery. "It's metamorphosed. It's metamorphosing in broad daylight, it's really the most sinister and evil." But Michael looked at the coffin nails in his hand and the black dog blood next to the coffin, but fortunately, these things suppressed her. "She will never be reborn." Hearing Michael's words, my body trembled, and I looked at Michael in confusion. Wouldn't it be better to suppress it? Why must she never be reborn? Michael narrowed his eyes, with a hint of cruelty on his face. "A centipede will not die even if it is dead. It is better to get rid of it once and for all than to worry about it in the future. It is just a fierce ghost, there is no need to be merciful to it." I lowered my head for a while, then said sullenly, "Why can't you be more merciful? You should know what she has been through, right? It is the people in our village who have wronged her." Michael's face flashed with disdain. "But she is already dead. If I don't hold back now, everyone in your village may die because of her in the future. Which is more important, one person's life or a bunch of people's lives? Can't you tell the difference?" Michael with burning eyes, "You are wrong. The lives of a group of people are lives, but the life of one person is also a life. Everyone only has one life. We cannot allow innocent people to die tragically just because there are many perpetrators. Not holding everyone accountable is the most unreasonable thing in the world." After I finished speaking, Michael was silent. After a long, long time, he suddenly laughed and said to me, "Who knows? Perhaps you are right. But the belief I've had since I was a child is that the injustice of one person is nothing compared to the lives of many people. As for what you said, when you have enough ability, you can do as you wish. But now, you must follow my rules." At this point, I knew I couldn't convince Michael, so I stopped talking. Listening to Michael's words patiently and uncomplainingly. "Help him nail the coffin into my sister-in-law's coffin inch by inch." He then poured black dog blood on the coffin lid. Everything went smoothly, and Michael's condition visibly relaxed. He asked me to carry the coffin with him and walk towards the mass grave. "I'm a little confused, shouldn't he be buried in the cemetery on the back hill? Why was she thrown into a mass grave?" Michael explained to me as we walked, "Because she died a violent death. Although I suppressed it, the evil spirit is still very strong. If we bury it in the back mountain, it will ruin the fortune of our entire village. It may take many years, but I won't have a peaceful life. But the mass grave is different. The mass grave is originally a place of extreme een, and extreme een can control extreme evil just right. After listening to Michael's words, I sneered, "You really have thought it through. It really is true, you have made all the plans for the bad guys." 21. By the time we got home, my brother was well again. The third uncle thanked Michael profusely. Michael had to stay overnight. Michael wanted to decline. I interrupted and said, "Stay overnight. It's going to be dark soon. You won't be able to leave the village before dark. I know you are a master of Taoism and you are not afraid of dirty things. But in our village, the roads are difficult to travel at night. It would be bad if there was an accident." Michael then nodded in agreement. At night, after everyone has gone to sleep, I took a jug of wine and went to Michael's room. Michael was a little surprised to see me. I shook the jug at Michael. "It's been a day. Drink something. I know you're having a hard time holding it in." Michael looked at me in confusion. "How did you know?" I sneered, "I have had a keen sense of smell since I was a child. When you stood near me today, I smelled alcohol. It's the aroma of wine that penetrates your skin and bones. It's obvious that you drink it often. I didn't drink all day today, you must be holding it in." Michael was no longer polite to me. He snatched the wine jug from my hand and gulped it down. I watched Michael finish his full jug of wine and breathed a sigh of relief. I sat opposite him, staring at him in the dim yellow light. "Actually, you're really not a good person." Michael was stunned. I smiled and said, "Don't be so quick to deny it. When you came today, you saw at first sight that third uncle wanted to use me to exchange for his life. But you didn't show any emotion at all. It shows that in your eyes, human life is really a cheap thing. The people in our village are so heartless that they ganged up on my sister-in-law and forced her to death, but you want her to never be reborn. And he has taken every possible consideration into account for the people in our village. You really are not a good person. You are cold-hearted and cannot distinguish between good and evil." Michael got a little angry when he heard me say that about him. He wanted to hit me with the whisk at hand, but found that he had no strength at all. I grinned and pointed to the wine jug beside me. "Is the wine good? This is a special wine made in our village. It is extremely sweet, but there is one bad thing. After drinking it, your body will be numb for the whole night." Michael stared at me. "What do you want to do? Can you kill me?" I shook my head. "Of course I can't, but my sister-in-law can." As soon as I finished speaking, my sister-in-law came in with the child in her arms. She grinned at Michael. "I'm not afraid of ghosts crying, but I'm afraid of ghosts laughing. Ghosts laughing is a sign of death." Michael looked at my sister-in-law in horror, muttering, "Impossible, how could it be possible? You are clearly sealed. How is that possible? What's impossible?" I interrupted Michael with a sneer. "I gave you the coffin nails and the black dog blood. Do you think I tampered with it?" Under Michael's horrified gaze, my sister-in-law slowly walked towards Michael. 22. When my sister-in-law and I went to my mother's room, she was still asleep. My mother, my brother and my third uncle were all gathered together, discussing something. When my mother saw me, she was stunned at first, then she got angry and wanted to scold me. It wasn't until I moved away that they saw my sister-in-law behind me. The three people's faces were filled with horror. Uncle San pointed at me and said, it's you, why are you doing this?" I looked at Uncle San coldly. Why? Why else? Your family has usurped my family's property and treated me like a dog, and you're asking me why? Whenever there is a little danger, you are the first to push me out to save my life. In your eyes, my life is not even as good as a dog's. And you still ask me why? I just want to live, but you won't even give me that. After I finished speaking, I turned around and walked out of the room. And my sister-in-law, out of my sight, was holding the child and walking towards the three of them step by step.